Good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be with you all today. My name is Leonard, and I will be sharing with you my thoughts and perspectives on product management in the enterprise software company delivering cloud infrastructure services and applications. So, a little bit about myself. So I've been with Oracle for close to about 20 years now. So I'm a software engineer by training. So did a bit of software engineering work, including leading engineering teams before transiting into product management about 15 years ago. So currently, I look after strategic programs and products worldwide for Oracle Labs. So Oracle Labs is the principal research and development organization for Oracle, and our mission is to really research and develop technologies that will play a significant role in the evolution of technology and society. Prior to this, I led product management and strategy for one of the components in Oracle's customer experience SaaS software. So some of the experience, or rather some of the examples that I'll be sharing today using in my presentation will be based on this role. It's also worth noting that whatever that I'm about to share is based on my own personal experiences and perspectives and do not reflect any official position taken by Oracle or Oracle Labs. So the agenda for today's presentation is as follows. So first, I'll give an introduction to the product management role, share some of the daily activities that the product manager has to go through, as well as sharing a slice of what a typical release schedule looks like for me and how do I generally organize my product roadmap. Then I will share some of the challenges that a product manager face and basically using my own examples as a backdrop and what are some of the trade-offs that I had to make. And then I will wrap up this presentation by sharing some of the lessons learned throughout my product management journey. So throughout the presentation, so please feel free to drop your questions at any point in time. No question is a silly question, obviously. So while I'll do my best to answer the questions to the best of my abilities, there may be some questions which I may not be able to answer or have no immediate answer for. And so for that, I seek your understanding and forgiveness. All right. So just to manage expectations for this session, right? If you're here thinking that someone will tell you everything that you need to know about product management or tell you what courses to take, what certifications to take, or provide links to any best practices or document templates, you will likely be very disappointed because that's not what I'm here to do. Right. Instead, what I hope to achieve is to share with you the realities of a product management journey, how that journey might look like using my own experience, challenges, failures, and lessons learned as a backdrop. So again, this is a sharing session. No, sharing goes both ways. If there are any product managers out there, more than happy for you to chime in and share your experiences so that the learning becomes richer for everybody. Okay, and with that, let's get started. Right. So I'm sure you guys really want to do this job, right? So many interesting roles in enterprise software development, and I would say that product management is easily one of the more challenging ones, right? For the very simple reason, product managers are often tasked with that responsibility to deliver and own the product, yet not given explicitly not explicitly given the resources nor the authority to do so, right? Being able to wear multiple hats at once while still having one head is almost a de facto requirement for a product manager, right? You are a market reader, visionary, half-baked lawyer, biz dev person who's able to come up with pricing models, projections for your product, and that's just on the business side of things, right? On the technical side, you're also expected to hold your own in a technical conversation with your development team, so that they know what you're talking about, and also you know that they're not telling you stuff just to get you off your back, but actually can't deliver. Of course, no, there's I mean, not to mention there's also your daily grind of the work, which includes defining requirements, curating the user experience, owning the product backlog and roadmap for the X number of releases. So that, in a whirlwind nutshell, is what a project manager does. Of course, it will vary from company to company. If you're in a startup, most likely the situation that you encounter is that you will get you will be hands on almost everything that you do. And if you're in an enterprise, development organization, you will likely be part of a larger product management team. So, case in point, in my previous role as a SaaS product manager, I am part of a product management team consisting of over 40 product managers, and that is just inbound product management. So there's a concept between inbound and outbound. Inbound, usually you would deal with development team, internal stakeholders, less the sales folks. Outbound, it's really customers, marketing, sales partners, and the like. So team of over 40 just for inbound product management, that probably gives you a sense of how complex that product in question might be, right? And the reason why product management is such a complex role is really something that is born, I think, is really something that is born out of necessity. So you've probably seen this diagram before in one of its many shapes and forms, but this kind of paints the reality of where the product manager sits in context to the business, to the development team, as well to the customers. Right? You look at it this way: customer has one or more business problems that they want to address, and the development team develops a product or solution that addresses the business problem and addresses it in a manner where the customer, where it's easy to use for the customer and intuitive to use, right? Of course, no product exists to serve one customer only. So the development team will endeavor, or rather the team will endeavor to understand what are the challenges of that the industry faces and map that into what the customer is facing so that they can extrapolate a common understanding of the problem to be able to deliver a solution that would be able to suit the customer and the industry. So, and among the multiple stakeholders that you can think of in these three spheres, only the product manager is suited to bring the stakeholders in these three spheres together in a cohesive manner. Because if you look at it from another angle, each of these spheres will have their own goals and interests to address, right? The development team or company that's developing the product has a higher stake interest in this because they want to develop the product to be able to drive revenue for the company, right? And the more and the more customers using the product means additional more revenue for the organization. Therefore, it is up to the development team or company to bring these three spheres together uh, and address the common pain points. And that's where the product manager comes in, because you certainly don't expect engineering or QA to be driving consensus on what to be built and what business problems to address. Now let's take a look at the day-to-day activities that a product manager is involved in. So this is just a sample and a very, very high-level slice of the type of work that a product manager is involved in. And you can see that it probably covers quite a few disciplines, ranging from business to technical and everything in between, right? And you would have realized by now a good number of tasks and a good number of skills or tasks that a product manager is involved in requires quite a bit of soft skills, right? Skills like negotiation, influencing, managing expectations, developing empathy, seeing things from the perspective of your counterparts. These are just some of the skills that are employed as part of the product manager's toolkit, excuse me. So yeah, just part of the product manager's toolkit. So I I get asked this question quite often. So should a product manager come from a business background or from a technical background? So I guess the answer is it depends, right? So for me, I come from a technical background, but I've also worked with outstanding product managers who started out with a business or arts degree, right? Regardless of your starting point, I think whether is it technical, business, or arts, I think a good product manager knows what the job requires and knows that the job requires business, technical, and soft skills, and is prepared to get equipped with the relevant skills in order to be competent for the job. So we'll revisit this diagram later in more detail when we talk about product management challenges. All right, so now I'm going to just share a slice of what it means, at least from my perspective, when it talks to releasing a product, right? So what you see on screen down here, it's a very abstracted form, but it is a typical release cycle that I go through as a product manager. So one of the most important KPIs for a product manager is to be able to deliver incremental value to your customer through regular product releases, right? So what you see here, although it's an abstracted form, it is a reflection of what I went through, like what I mentioned earlier. So for the SaaS product itself, so just a recap, I product manage a component belonging to a larger SaaS product. So this SaaS product in question, there are 4 major releases in a year, so one release every quarter. So for the component that I product manage, we release every month. So and I work with a team of 6 developers, 2 QAs, and 1 engineering manager. So the team is literally spread out all over the world. Product managers in Singapore, QA in India, development in Eastern Europe and various parts of the US. So, and as you can imagine, having a having a team composition like this, communication and managing communication over time zones is a challenge in itself. So, just to share, my daily Scrum calls happen depending on daylight savings, sometime between 11 p.m. to 11:30 p.m. Singapore time. So the development team that is configured, we run sprints lasting 2 weeks each. So therefore, each release gets about 6 sprints for us. So for my team, we try to wrap up any development work for the release by about week 8. So we leave the last 4 weeks to start release prep and also to do regression testing as well as fixing any bugs that came up as a result of this testing. So as mentioned earlier, because my component is released monthly, so typically what we will release out as the goal release would be about build number 2 or build number 3, thereabouts. So I own the product backlog, obviously, and I work closely with the development manager and the engineering leads to groom the backlog. So backlog grooming for me is a daily affair. So I define the epics, I define the high-level stories that will drive the functional requirements. Sprint planning for us happens sometime around middle of the second week. That's when I meet with the engineering managers and the leads to basically go through what needs to be done for the next sprint. So of course, this is not just me talking, right? So sprint planning, as you guys who are if you're in the profession and you are agile practitioner, you would be well aware it is a collaboration. It is a collaborative exercise between development and product management. There's to come to a sort of consensus on what needs to be built, right? This may include not just building new features. This may also include fixing bugs. This may also include putting enhancements into infrastructural or platform components so that the team can be more efficient in future sprints down the road. So that's more or less what you do from a development perspective, and those are the bars that are highlighted in green, right? On the documentation front, I have the benefit of working with a documentation team that looks after all documentation requirements for the SaaS product. There are 2 types of documentation that we need to work on: product documentation, as well as something that we call release readiness content. So release readiness content would include a summary of the list of new features that will be released, who the feature for, how to access, how to use it, where to look for information, and things like that. So this information would usually go into the release notes or into the what's new section of the release documentation. So towards the end of the second month, that's when I'll start that's where I'll start working with my assigned documentation writer on what needs to be updated in the product documentation. So what I need to do is basically, to show the documentation writer what are the features that we intend to release by means of demo. It may not be a fully developed feature, but a combination of what you see on screen versus user stories versus screenshots, screen design, and what we intended for the feature to be. The documentation writer would generally have a good idea of how to document or what to document, right? And documentation is a back and forth process because they will come up with a first draft. I will look at it. I will vet the content. I will vet the correctness, and then I'll make suggestions to edits and copy, and then I send it back. So it's but basically she will produce that documentation draft, which I will look through and vet for content correctness. Marketing collateral may or may not be produced depending on the needs for marketing for that particular release. So again, if required, I will work with the outbound marketing team. Again, there is outbound product management that we also have a product marketing team that the outbound people interface with. So, but a lot of the content that they will use will actually be driven from the inbound product manager. So that's when I will work with marketing to produce that collateral. And then marketing will then take that content and apply their template magic, for whatever to just to ensure messaging consistency. Then of course there are your regular stakeholder updates, that I'll need to do for each release, right? So when I talk about stakeholders, there are basically three main groups: management, customers, as well as the field. So when I say field, I mean salespeople, right? So at the start of the release cycle, that's usually where we do our management updates. That is where we take stock of whatever is released, and basically also to share whatever that we are working on and how the roadmap will look like 3 releases down the road. So we kind of generally work on a 3 release time frame. So towards the end of the second month, when we know more or less, when we know the features are more or less baked, this is when the product marketing folks will also organize a roadmap session with some of our largest customers. Again, we will share with them what's coming, what is coming up in the immediate release, and what the plans are like for the next few releases. So these calls are especially important because our customers are very involved, are very involved in our roadmap process. So they will ask questions, and they will make suggestions on how the roadmap needs to be tweaked in terms of prioritization. Of course, then this is usually again a very collaborative process between us and the customers. But this actually sends this actually is something that is very good, in that sense that you have customers who are invested, and you know that your customers are using your product and want to continue using your product. So where else? What do I have? So about a month before release, looking at this, so we will start to do an update to the salespeople, basically to inform them, okay, for the upcoming release, what are the features that are coming up, and where can you find the documentation about what these features do, so that then they would be able to start to engage their customers to be able to take advantage of these features as they are released into the cloud. So finally, to tie all these things together, we also have a release management team that I work very closely with. This is a team that we call RM team. So release management is the process gatekeeper for all the components within the product. So they make sure that all the components that make up the SaaS product are on track from a development perspective, pass through all the major gates, all the approvals, and none of these major milestones are missed when making the quarterly reviews. Of course, they rely heavily on input provided by the respective inbound product managers, and that's why every 2 weeks we will have this meeting, something that we call a green board meeting, where all the inbound product managers come in and basically do a blog status update, right? The month before release is usually pretty busy for the RM team, because that is when the docking process starts. When we're ready for release, we will usually dock our code, and that's when the docking process starts to lock our branches in for release. So I won't go into the specifics again, but there are several gates and sign-offs that each component needs to obtain before being accepted into dock. So this is how a quarter in general looks like for me as a SaaS product manager. And what's important to note is that what I'm showing down here is the things that are fixed and recurring. There is a whole bunch of other stuff that is ad hoc that will eat up a considerable amount of time, right? Things like customer calls, conversations with inter and intra-product stakeholders about collaboration opportunities, responding to RFPs, and also responding to information requests coming from regulatory bodies such as the EU. So all in all, these things, when you put together, you probably get the impression that the product manager's job is actually highly fragmented. In reality, it really is, and that is actually part of the challenge that I will elaborate a little bit more later. Okay, so when it comes to communicating product roadmaps, I think different product managers will do it differently, but the important thing is that it must be up to date, right? So for me, I maintain my actual roadmap in Jira, but I will produce a PowerPoint-friendly version like what you see on screen. Again, it's it's an abstracted version, heavily redacted. Um, so I will produce a PowerPoint-friendly version to communicate the roadmap with management or customers. So again, like what I mentioned earlier, the practice within our group is to project our roadmap 3 releases down so that management and customers know what's coming up. Anything that is not inside this backlog or lined up for the next 3 releases gets listed out in something that we call version X. So basically to be available sometime in the future. So again, for ease of communication, and this is really about communicating what your product is going to release in terms of features, right, to external people. So the external facing roadmap is organized into themes. So using my product as an example, there are 4 major themes. This will include areas like platform and performance, configuration and administration, channel experience, and user experience. Um, the roadmap presentation will also include details like the number of story points completed, number of story points remaining, what's the current team velocity, so that we can also communicate team cadence as well. Obviously, team cadence is communicated to management and not to our customers, right? When communicating roadmap to external parties, whether is it to customers or analysts, we will also usually include a safe harbor statements just to let them know that while what you see on screen is current and up to date, it is also subject to change. All right, so challenges and trade-offs. So let's talk about these the challenges that a product manager face. So you've seen this slide earlier that talks about the things that a product manager does. So the stuff that is coded in a darker shade of color, those are things that I generally do on a daily basis. In fact, a large portion of my time is actually spent on 3 things: talking to customers, collaborating with other product stakeholders, and also managing approvals for any third-party integrations that my product needs in order to deliver its intended features to the customer. So going back to something that I mentioned earlier in my presentation, product managers are tasked with the responsibility to own and deliver the product, but yet not given the authority or the resources to do so. So what this also means is that a product manager relies very heavily on other product stakeholders, folks like engineering, QA, documentation, release management, to deliver what he or she needs to deliver. Therein lies the biggest challenge, I think, for a product manager, which is your ability to deliver your product depends on very much how you are able to influence your product stakeholders to work together with you, right? Don't this is a lesson that I learned very early. Don't assume that all the all the other product stakeholders are on board with you and your vision, because no, it's probably helpful to assume that they are not, because no, at the end of the day, the only person that has a vested interest in the success of the product is the product manager. So if you look at this list of things that a product manager does, you can see that there are a lot of soft skills that are required, right? So skills like negotiation, empathy, team collaboration, these are all what I call table stakes or basic requirements, basic soft skills when it comes to successfully executing uh, tasks that a product manager needs to do. In fact, if you have not realized this by now, looking at this list, looking at the list of tasks that you have on screen down here, all this actually can be summed up in one word: communication, right? The product manager is the chief communicator for the product. In that, when working on delivering the product to a customer, he or she is constantly communicating upstream towards management, sideways to peers and other product stakeholders, downstream to customers, to field, to marketing, and to partners. In fact, communication is at the heart of everything that a product manager does or does not do, right? Whatever happens or does not happen in a product is the result of what the product manager is communicating with the other product stakeholders, right? It is the single, in my opinion, it is the single most important thing that the product manager needs to do. And unfortunately, it is also one of the hardest. Why is it one of the hardest? Simply because the people that you work with will come from a diverse background, such a diverse background that you need to adapt your communications skills and tools in order to get your message successfully across to the other side. I think when you work with technology long enough, or for that matter, any industry, you kind of automatically assume that the whole world thinks and speaks the way like you. That's probably true, like what I say for any industry. But as we all know, the real world comes in different stripes and colors. And as product managers, you very often need to straddle these different stripes to get things moving. So, case in point, in my role as a product manager, I deal quite a bit with third-party integrations. Each of these integrations come with their own terms and conditions, and all those terms and conditions need to be approved by corporate, specifically legal. Right. So for each integration, I'll need to work with our legal team to prepare to basically prepare the approval package for submission. And in order to do that, I need to basically let the lawyers understand what I'm trying to do and what I'm trying to deliver for the customers. Now, if you have not dealt with lawyers before, they are literally speaking a different language that sounds like English, or what we call legalese. So it then becomes important for me to communicate in their lingo to help them understand what my product is trying to do so that they can help me vet if the terms and conditions are acceptable to Oracle. Now, obviously, it's not possible to list out all the challenges that a product manager does, or rather faces, but here are a few common ones, right? The first one, task prioritization. So we look at the wide spectrum of things that a product manager needs to handle, right? Task prioritization will always be a challenge, right? Development priorities will always shift, but the magnitude of that shift will largely depend on the maturity of the product. There is no magic formula in terms of prioritization, and a lot of it really has to deal with what the situation is and whether those shifts will impact customer or not, right? That said, if you and your stakeholders are aligned in terms of your product vision and what needs to be delivered for each release, the chances of you having to make those major shifts in terms of task changes will likely be lower, right? The second challenge, I think, would be stakeholder alignment. This applies to both internal and external stakeholders. So you need to understand that everyone that you work with, you will always place their goals and interests above yours, right? So your job as a product manager is not to change those priorities or to find common ground, but rather to work with stakeholders and let them realize that working together with you works in their best interest, right? So a lot of negotiation skills, a lot of influencing skills go into this, and this is something that, even for me today, it's a constant work in progress, right? Internal approvals, this is something that I touched on in my previous slide as an example. I think it is also something that you cannot avoid regardless of the size of your organization. So every approval will be unique in itself, and the devil is always in the details when you pore over the terms and conditions and the service level agreements, for each component that you may want to use. Um, One of the and some of these details in these T's and C's may very well surface up as product requirements for your product. So again, using my own experience as an example, one of the integrations that I need to work on actually has a throttle limit built into their API. So what that means is that I can only invoke the partner API X number of times before the API charges kicks in. So given that the product that I product manage, the component that I product manage is offered at no extra cost to our customers, we need to be very careful in terms of how we are invoking that product, or rather how we're invoking that API. So as a result, for that particular integration, checking the number of calls invoked for that particular API became a product requirement, just so that we are avoiding triggering the throttle limit. Okay, last but not least, everybody's favorite, time management. So given the number of things that a product needs to deal with, time management will always be a challenge. For me, this is something, again, like stakeholder alignment. This is also something that is a constant work in progress. And I think one of the main lessons that I've learned as a product manager is self-pacing is crucial, right? self-pacing is crucial in order for you to have longevity in your product management career. It is also crucial in maintaining your mental well-being as a product manager, though, to avoid getting burnout, which actually happens quite often in product management. So, okay, lessons learned. So I think after about 15 years in product management, I sometimes ask myself, what have I learned? Actually, in retrospect, as I reflect, quite a bit. But the learning journey is always ongoing, right? Especially in a role like product management, where, in my opinion, the soft skills actually matter more than the hard skills. But there are a few evergreen lessons that will apply in most, I think, in most, if not all, situations, right? So first of all, right, what works, right? What are the things that I think works? So the first acid test that any product manager needs to go through is to deliver incremental value for your customer through regular product release. For that to happen, the product manager and the development team must work as a cohesive unit. So from that context, in an agile development team, the preservation of team cadence and autonomy, and maintaining velocity within an acceptable range needs to be top priority. As a product manager, then that becomes your goal as well, right? Because you are an integral part to the team, and you help the team maintain cadence and velocity. And if you do, and how you do that, by managing your own expectations of what can be reasonably delivered for each sprint. So be demanding, but also be flexible, right? That flexibility will go a long way in building team cohesion and autonomy, which will serve you well down the road in future product releases. Second, okay, every superhero will need their own sidekick or partner in crime. In the case of a product manager, that person would be your development counterpart. That person might be the dev lead or the development manager. So I'm fortunate to have built strong partnerships with my dev counterparts, and quite a number of them became friends outside of work. So your dev counterpart will be the second person to sign on to your product vision. The first person is your boss, right? So be completely open with that person. Share what your product vision is, and what your goals are, and what are your fears, right? Make a commitment to your dev counterpart to be completely open to each other, right? And always be professional, because in discussions, sometimes when the discussion becomes very passionate, there may be some conflict, right? But always understand that this is really because you have two or more committed individuals in a conversation trying to better the product. Always think of it that way, right? Seek their inputs when it comes to business decisions, even though they may not be able to contribute much. The point here is that the more involved your development counterpart is in the overall product development process, the more committed they will be. And in time to come, you build up that trust with your development counterpart. And more importantly, this thing called psychological safety, right? And expand the building of psychological safety to the rest of the development team, right? You're not going to be a know-it-all. So might as well help build a team culture that everyone can be upfront and everyone can be on the same page, right? So again, same rules apply down here. The more involved the development team in general is in understanding the business drivers and challenges, the greater the commitment you will see from the team. I've had numerous occasions where the product requirements were made sharper, which actually resulted in a better feature because of inputs coming in from development. So finally, in the what works category, so if you're working on an enterprise cloud product, chances are you're not the only product manager for that product. So when working as part of a product management team, always help your fellow product managers when possible, because you won't know when you will need help. And it's always a good idea to build up goodwill among your peers that you can call on one day. So those are things that I've realized work. What are things that doesn't work, right? Blindly sticking to theory and methodology is a big no-no for me, right? as with all processes, whatever that you read from the books, whatever that you learn from courses, and whatever that you get from certifications, it's really more or less a guideline, right, for you to get started. What matters more when you're in the hot seat, right, when where the rubber meets the road, is how you adapt that process and use it in such a way that works best for your team, right? Um, Taking a top-down approach when managing products is also a big no-no for me. I'm sure. I mean, for those of you who are in product management, or who have read articles or things in product management, you will come across this popular saying that a product manager is like the CEO of the product. I know of a few product managers who actually took that saying quite literally, and needless to say, the product wasn't very well managed during the time as PMs. Remember, as a product manager, you are, among many other things, a consensus builder. Use empathy to understand the points of view from your stakeholders and show them why working with you works in their best interest, right? Those are little building blocks towards building a winning team. And everybody wants to be on a team that wins. Finally, you also need to understand that, as with all things in life, right, things will change. And you need to have that flexibility to be able to adapt, especially if your customers are telling you that roadmap items need adjustment, right? I've lost count how many times customer told me that I need to bump some feature up just because it will make a differentiation in their business. When you get customers like that, the first thing that you do, thank your lucky stars, because what that means is that you have customers using your product and they care enough to tell you what works better for them, right? So in conclusion, I want to leave you with this comic strip from Dilbert. Right. The strip says project management, but it can be easily applied to the product management context. Remember, your goal as a product manager is to be able to help deliver incremental value to your customers through your product that your customers use and want to continue using. To do that, you need to assemble a team that can help you realize that goal. And anything else, anything else is secondary. So that is prime directive. And you assemble that team by bringing them on board with your ideas and your vision of what the product is set out to do. Yet remain flexible to understand that things will change. While you may have a plan, your customers' input will matter more, right? So the key here is always to stay nimble and agile, keep an open mind, and always remind yourself that you are one small part in a multi-team effort that makes the product a success. All right. So with that, I've come to the end of my presentation, and I'll be happy to take some questions if there are any. Okay, I do have one. Oops. All right. Q&A. Right. So, okay, I have a question online here. So as a PM, how do you manage how technical solution decisions, especially for features that will need complex designing? Okay. So how I look at this in terms of designing a feature, I rely very much on my technical stakeholders to understand, to basically propose that technical solution. So as a PM, I will basically define what that feature is, what is the AC, the acceptance criteria for that. In terms of how that gets built underneath, um, generally I will defer it to the engineering team because they work as part of a larger product organization. They work as part of a larger product organization, and they will have set pieces in place in terms of architecture and certain architectural requirements and SLOs that they need to meet in terms of performance, in terms of storage, in terms of resiliency. So those are things that when we discuss, I will actually defer quite a bit to the technical stakeholders. But of course, sometimes if they will propose something, say for example, I can't no in terms of say turnaround time, though we are only able to achieve such a throughput, then I would basically tell them that that doesn't work for me from an acceptance criteria standpoint. So you need to basically go back to the technical drawing board and basically come up with something, right? So there's going to be that tension, pushback and things like that, because engineering will always tell you, you know what, based on time and based on the ability to deliver, this is the best we can do. Then that's where we start to look at, okay, so let's unpack the problem. Let's unpack the problem a little bit more. So what is it that we're looking at, right? So try and dissect the issue a little bit, and sometimes that what that leads to, it may be something that that we may need to address at the platform level or at the infrastructural level to be able to achieve the things that I would want to set out as that I list out as acceptance criteria. And what that may mean is that this feature, instead of being delivered on this sprint, it may need to be bumped down, say, for example, 1 or 2 sprints later. So that's the piece that I'm talking about, to be when it comes to being nimble, being flexible, what you need to be able to do in order to achieve your objectives to deliver that feature in its intended form to the customer. So hopefully that answers the question. Okay. All right. So how do you see customer feedback with such frequent sprint cycles? Quarterly roadmap review appears limited. Um, that's true in the sense, but you also have to look in context for in context to what we do, which is enterprise software development. If you look at it from an ERP context, you may not want changes to happen that frequently, right? That said, you want to be able to constantly take feedback in, that you would be able to log that in to your backlog to be able to address them in good time. So there are various channels, because I involve as an inbound product manager, I am probably more involved in customers than I ought to be, but that's fine because I like talking to them. That so customer conversations, the ad hoc customer conversations is one channel for feedback. Obviously, the roadmap briefing sessions is also another avenue. There is something else that we do. That one is probably once or twice a year, which is something that we call a customer advisory board. That's when we gather, and we do this in major geographical locations. We have one in APAC, we have one in Europe, we have one in North America. So basically, what we do is that we will invite some of our largest customers to be, again, no, it's a feedback, it's a roadmap sharing session, but it's a more intimate design. It's more intimate setting, because that is going to be something that lasts a couple of days. So that's where we start to really unpack every roadmap item, and they will basically just share what works, what doesn't work, what needs to be reprioritized, and things like that. So all in all, there are that there will always be, and for a product manager, you need to always be able to endeavor to open up multiple channels for customer to reach back to you. There's one other thing that I forgot to mention, which is basically we have this thing called we maintain a website where customers are able to basically throw in their ideas and suggestions as well. Forgot what's it called. I think it's called Idea Lab or something like that, right? So again, that is broken down into many different product categories. I moderate and administer the category that I'm involved in, which is basically messaging integrations. So that's when my customers, it could be, it could, yeah, that's when my customers will basically put in suggestions, enhancement requests, or questions and things like that. So that's again, you take those feedback from various sources and then you rationalize that, putting them into the product backlog, and then you just constantly grow. Okay, what else we have? In the course of your career or observations, are there any untenable product manager situations? What are factors that make the situation untenable? I think, well, what makes a situation untenable? I think first of all, I think if you are in a toxic work environment, I think that probably should I think throw up a big red flag. If you are burning both sides of the candle, metamorphically speaking, um, that also sets you up in a situation where you start to have a burnout as well. So again, no, openly sharing a failure that happened to me. Like what I mentioned, because my team is spread out across all different geographical locations, so it's very common for me to work late into the night, and no, that's when you start to look at you work at Eastern European time hours, North America hours, and then after that, you go to sleep, you wake up, there's APAC for you to contend with. That's when So there was a period of time where I was actually bordering close to burnout, and that was failure on my part, right? Because I didn't pace myself. And I need to also realize that while I mentioned that I am part of a team, it is just me as a product manager. Like if I go down, basically engineering will basically just look at the product, look at the backlog, and just do their best guess, right? Um, so that reflection from that episode is I need to pace myself, right? Pacing myself includes setting limits on when you can respond to stuff, because everything will come to you as urgent, right? And there's this saying, when everything is urgent, nothing is urgent, right? So you have to set pace for yourself. You have to pace time and basically let them know that okay, this is not, unless it is a production down issue, no, this is something that can be addressed the following business day. So I've learned to be able to set limits where I'm able to space out time for me to recover. That prevents me from going into an untenable situation where I fail to function. Right. That's from a personal perspective. Organizational workplace perspective, when you have when you belong to a team culture where everybody is suspicious of each other, where everybody is just trying to second guess each other, then that becomes an environment where it is difficult to progress. So again, that's one of the things that I mentioned about building up this culture of psychological safety, where everybody knows that, hey, we're all in this together. Whether the product sinks or swims, it's up to us, right? That's where you start to build cohesion, and you start off from a point whereby let's journey on together, and however this journey takes us, we know that we're in the same boat, right? So you forge that common product identity, that common product team identity that you have. So what else? Yeah, I think basically that's it. Okay. I hope I answered that question though. So all right. Yeah, if there are any more questions, feel free to put them into the chat. All right. If not, so all right. So this is questions. All right. If not, thank you all very much. If you want to reach out to me, this is my email. Feel free to drop a note. Conversation doesn't end here. We're more than happy to engage with you guys, just to share some of the thoughts that I have. If not, thank you for your time.